So today, we're going to talk about the 5 books that I think you should read in 2021. So reading is one of my hobbies that I do to stay mentally fresh. I try to continue to learn and to grow. And in keeping track of what I read, I wanted to make a list for you to end this year with the 5 books that I think that you should consider adding to your reading list in 2021. So I'll try to make a case for each book. I'll tell you what it's about and then tell you why I think that you should consider adding it to your reading list in 2021. So here's my top 5 of 2020. So number 5 on the list is The Brain That Changes Itself. Now this is probably the most boring sounding book because it's about the brain. Even more boring sounding, it's about a concept called neuroplasticity. I know, it sounds extremely boring, but it's not. This is not a textbook. This is not just a book full of experiments and stuff. It tells stories about the concept called neuroplasticity. People used to think that the brain was like a machine, that if this part of your brain, controlled your ability to write, and this part of your brain got injured, they used to think, well, that's it. You can never write again, no matter what. But science is starting to show that your brain is actually able to adapt and to change and to grow, in that other parts of your brain could step in and do what this part of your brain used to be able to do. That's the idea called neuroplasticity. Your brain's not just a machine that whenever part of it breaks, it's done. It can grow and it can adapt. And so why I think you should read this book is because that information tells you that truly anything is possible. This is the science behind the idea that anything you set your mind to, you can do. So you kind of run out of excuses of, I'm just naturally not good at this. Well, guess what? Your brain can adapt and change. So I think neuroplasticity is a very interesting concept. The book is, I promise, it's written in an interesting way. It tells really fascinating stories. So check that out. The Brain That Changes Itself. The number 4 book on my list of best books to read in 2021. It's called Extreme Ownership. Now this book was written by 2 former Navy SEALs, and it tells a lot of stories from their time in training and combat overseas. So each chapter kind of starts off telling a story of them in combat, and then it gets into the lesson that they learned, the principle, and then it applies it to business in every single chapter. So it goes through a variety of lessons, a variety of principles, leadership principles that you can apply in any area of your life. Now, why I think you should read this book. It has a lot of powerful concepts. Probably the most interesting and the most powerful to me that I took away was the first chapter that the name of the book came from, Extreme Ownership. And it's the idea that as a leader, you should take personal responsibility for everything that affects the mission. Even if it doesn't have to do with you directly, it has to do with maybe one of your subordinates, maybe someone above you in the organization. You take responsibility for it. Blaming doesn't do any good. Making excuses doesn't help you at all. It's only when you take extreme ownership that you can have an impact on the mission. So it's a great book. Definitely check it out. The 3rd best book that I read this year, it's called The Heavenly Man. This is probably one of the most interesting life stories I've ever read about a person. It's about Brother Yun. He was a man influential in the growth of the underground church in China in the 1970s. It details his story, from how he got his start until now. I would say if you are a Christian or a person of any kind of faith, you should absolutely read this book. It is amazing. He is a man of great courage, great faith. It would surely be inspiring to any person of faith. And some of the stories, how God worked in his life are truly incredible. So I would recommend this even if you're not a person of faith. It's still a very interesting story. It talks about the Chinese underground church, which you may not be familiar with. It talks about the Chinese Communist Party. It just gets into a lot of details that you probably are not familiar with and would be very interesting to anyone. It's also interesting just looking at someone's life, even if you don't agree with what they believe in, that believes so strongly that they're willing to give everything for it. The courage, the commitment, it is truly inspiring, no matter what you believe. So definitely check this book out this year. The number 2 book that I read in 2020 that I would recommend to you this year, it could be a toss-up for number 1, honestly, but I think the number 1 edged it out just barely. But this book, Influence, Science, and Practice. Now, I bought this used and I couldn't see the cover of it. I believe this is maybe an older edition of the book, Influence, The Art of Persuasion. So you can order that book instead. But this book is fascinating. It is really interesting. It talks about 7 different principles of how we as human beings are influenced. So if you are interested in why people do what they do, in why people think what they think, this book is a great insight into human nature. It's a great insight into making sure that you're not taken advantage of or exploited by people that know how to influence you. So definitely check this out. I thought it was a great mix of studies and research and evidence on the one hand, but also just interesting stories and content on the other. So number 2 book of the year, Influence, Science, and Practice. Check it out. So the number 1 book I read this year that I would most recommend to you is called Goals. I actually pulled this right there above my thumb. You can see my kind of Hall of Fame books, the ones that really impacted me. I had to pull this book off that shelf to do this video because it impacted me that much. This will be one that I reread at least every other year, maybe every year. I believe goal setting is one of the most important skills that you can learn, and it is a skill that you can learn. Unfortunately, they don't teach you goal setting in school. They don't teach you goal setting even in college. But if you get your hands on an awesome book like this, you can learn how to set goals and achieve them. And honestly, it's life-changing. This book is probably the best book on goal setting I've ever read. I thought it was very detailed, start to finish, a very clear-cut plan. It asked very insightful questions to get you thinking, very straightforward exercises. So y'all, if you're looking for a book to start 2021 off with, this is the number 1 book that I would recommend to you. So if you don't know where to start with a reading list in 2021, I would be honored if you would consider starting with these books. I think that they would really impact you and make a difference in this year to come. I hope this year is an awesome year for each and every one of you, that you do all that you set out to do, you accomplish all your goals. And hopefully these books can be a small part of that. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let us know in the comments what you think of the book selection, and if you read any books in 2020 that you'd like to share with me, I would love to hear them, so just let me know below. Thanks so much, guys.